You've seen the headline, 4 minutes of exercise a day is enough. Enough? Really? There's a real study behind it, and the results might surprise you, but so will the fine print. Today, an orthopedic surgeon gives it to us straight. Yes, no, or yes, but. Stay tuned. Hi everyone, I'm Barbara, and this is Age Better. Before we dive in, if you find this episode useful, please share it with a friend who needs to hear it. Follow the show wherever you're listening and sign up for my newsletter, The Age Better Cheat Sheet on Substack. It's where I break down episodes like this one into simple steps you can actually use. Now, today is something new. Every so often, a study takes over the headlines. Maybe your sister sent you a text about it. Your neighbor mentions it at the mailbox. And you're left wondering, is this real? So I'm starting an occasional series where we take one of those studies, put it under the microscope, and bring in a medical expert to tell us yes, no, or yes, but. Today's study is a big one. Researchers at Penn State tested whether just 4 minutes of daily strength exercises, push-ups, chair stands, rows, and stair-stepping, 30 seconds each, could improve strength and balance in adults 65 and older who already had some trouble walking. The results? Genuinely impressive, but there's a lot the headlines are leaving out. So I sat down with someone who's been on the show many, many times, orthopedic surgeon and sports medicine specialist at Duke, and one of the smartest voices I know on strength, bones, and staying capable. Here's my conversation with Dr. Jocelyn Wittstein. Dr. Wittstein, welcome back to Age Better.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, no, we always have such a good conversation, especially when we talk about bones and muscle and how it all helps us to age better. But today we're doing something really fun, I think. We're talking about a study that came out in the medical journals, but then somehow it made the rounds recently in the general media. So I picked up on it and I said, this is very interesting. So let me bring Dr. Wittstein on to see if she says yes, no, or yes, but, which is like your 3 choices. So let's cut right to it. So this particular study says that you can do 4 minutes of exercise a day, and that's enough. So as an orthopedic surgeon and a sports medicine specialist at Duke, what say you?
So yes, if you're someone who has essentially no physical activity at baseline and you want to improve your health significantly, this small change can make a difference. No, if you're someone who is already more active than this is going to result in a decline in your physical health. And there are many buts. Just so many nuances to any interpretation of a study like this, really depending on the individual, where they're starting from, what their goals are.
Yeah, totally. And so let's just talk about what the study actually showed. 4 exercises, 30 seconds each. Push-ups, chair stands, meaning you're seated in a chair and then you stand up, sit, stand. Seated rows, stair stepping. So what impressed you most about this study?
Well, first of all, this is a study that showed very high compliance. So in people who were otherwise somewhat limited in their mobility already. And so anything that has high compliance is more likely to be effective than something that has low compliance, people just not participating in it or being unable to participate. So there was a low barrier to entry and high compliance, which was good. And then if you look at the end results of the study, the things that were most impressive to me is that in the intervention group, they were able to take people from a timed single leg balance that was less than 10 seconds to more than 10 seconds, which is actually a critical value. There was a study done in the British Journal of Sports Medicine in 2022 that showed that people who had less than 10 seconds of single leg balance versus those who had more than 10 seconds of single leg balance had an 87% greater mortality rate over a 7-year period. So that's a meaningful change that they achieved in these people. And the other, I think, pretty meaningful change was they looked at their time for doing, it's called a time sit to stand test, where they're doing 5 repetitions of sit to stand. And they moved the needle on these people significantly, reducing their time for 5 sit to stands by 2.76 seconds. They took them to a number under 11 seconds, which is another good number to be under. If you read that recent study in JAMA, which was based on the iData, where they compared women who took more than 17 seconds and those who took less than 11 seconds to do 5 sit to stands, there was a 35% difference in mortality risk. So these people weren't that bad off. They weren't over 17 seconds, but they were over 11 seconds and they got them under 11 seconds. So there were some meaningful functional changes. The single leg balance is the most impressive change to me, though.
I agree with you on
Period.
that. And by the way, you did mention the compliance part. I mean, it really was interesting. I'm reading here that the participants did the workout 81% of the days. That's high, nearly 6 days a week for 3 months. And most people probably wouldn't do that. So is the real headline not 4 minutes works, but 4 minutes is a dose people will actually take? Maybe.
Especially when you're looking at a group of people who already have some mobility limitations and have a low level of physical activity. You can't have people make such a large leap. So this was clearly attainable and something that people could do. Again, that low barrier to entry, or low hanging fruit, as we say.
Let's go back to the improvements, though, because you mentioned people did improve, which is why I think this study is making the rounds. But you're right. It's like, where are you starting from? But there was improvement in the balance. There was improvement in the sit to stand. And so when you translate that to real life, that's what's really important. The preference, of course, is that you do get up without having to use your arms, right? That's a good translation.
Right. Well, that's something I check in clinic. If you injure your arm and you need a shoulder surgery, like a shoulder replacement or a rotator cuff repair or something, and you can't get out of a chair without using your arms, it can be very limiting. But yeah, it is a significant marker of weakness if you can't get out of a chair without using your arms. Now, there are other issues, like some people have terrible knee arthritis, like debilitating, and are waiting to get a total knee or something like that. And so it's not always just strength, but certainly it is a reasonable marker of lower extremity strength and function.
And I think the message here is that it really is important to focus on these things so that you can live a good life as you get older. Let's talk about the but. Here's what the headlines skip. Every person in the study was inactive, already had difficulty walking a quarter mile. So who does the study really apply to, and who shouldn't take it as an excuse to scale back?
So this is applying to people who already have limited mobility and have basically zero baseline or very low baseline physical activity. These numbers certainly do not meet some of the thresholds that we know have other benefits for people. Of course, some of the recommendations are 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity physical activity or 75 minutes per week of vigorous intensity physical activity, both for brain and heart health. Certainly, it's not meeting those thresholds. But again, if you're doing nothing, doing something is an improvement. And we've learned from a lot of the UK Biobank data that actually as little as 5 minutes per day of vigorous activity can significantly reduce dementia risk by about 41%, can reduce cardiovascular-related mortality by similarly around 40%. But then there's a dose-dependent effect where you get into higher exposure to exercise, upwards of 140 to 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity exercise, you're going to see greater risk reduction for things like dementia, closer to a 70% risk reduction when compared to no activity. So it's not that there isn't added benefit to added exposure, but there is some baseline significant benefit to small amounts of vigorous activity. For people who are completely inactive, these 4 short exercises, that is a big bump in their intensity.
I was going to say that would be considered possibly vigorous activity, but for many of us, that's not.
That might be a vigorous added activity for them, but for most people, that's not. And there are other thresholds that have floated around recently. We all heard of the 10,000 steps per day, but then there was that recent Lancet article that kind of established that achieving 7,000 steps per day as compared to 2,000 steps per day decreased mortality by about 47% and decreased falls by about 28%. So again, 4 minutes of exercise is not even going to meet the 2,000 steps per day, which we're comparing to 7,000 steps per day to see these benefits. But yeah, I think if you're starting from a very low threshold, every little bit helps. And it really depends on where you're starting and what your goals are. I know you've interviewed Ben Levine in the past, who has demonstrated his protocol, which involves about 5 hours a week of cardiovascular activity, including a Norwegian 4x4 one day a week, improved VO2 max by about 18% or reversed heart age by about 20 years. If that's your goal, again, you're not going to accomplish that with 2 minutes of exercise.
Exactly. And you know what? The authors themselves actually even say this does not mean that 4 minutes is enough for heart health, body composition. And this is our territory for bone health. I mean, this is like a focal point of our conversation very often, Dr. Wittstein. So with 4 minutes of chair stands and stair stepping, those two in particular, do anything meaningful for osteoporosis prevention and overall bone health? Or I'm assuming there's a completely different prescription for that.
I think if this were your sum total of physical activity, this would not be enough for bone health. We know that, for example, even walking doesn't improve bone density, but exposure to more walking slows the loss of bone density, for example. And even just looking at volume of that, like there was the Nurses' Health study that was published in JAMA in the past, where they compared people who walked 4 hours per week versus 1 hour per week, and showed that the people that walked 4 hours per week reduced their risk of hip fractures by 41%. Well, if you think about the comparison group was the 1 hour of walking per week. I mean, this is not anywhere near 1 hour of walking per week, right? So again, the exercises included in the study are in many ways less intense or less volume, less exposure than the comparison control groups for many other studies. So this is truly a low barrier entry way to make small intervention but meaningful improvement for people who are essentially nearly sedentary with existing limitations in mobility. So it's impactful for that group, but not going to meet thresholds for other people.
And I think for the other people, which is the yes, but nuance also, is that it could be viewed as an exercise snack. Like, let's say you run out of time or you're at the airport or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can do something. And we all know about exercise snacks has become a thing now. There's an actual name for it where you just spend a minute or two. For example, I'll very often throughout the day just go and do a couple of planks or push-ups or jumping jacks or heel drops or go up and down stairs. I mean, the list is endless.
That gets back to that concept of these several 1-minute bouts of vigorous activity has a significant impact. Yeah, so I think people like to think about what the minimum amount you can do to improve something because it is appealing. But so often that minimum amount is compared to nothing. So
Yeah. I want to get back to the Norwegian 4x4, which you mentioned that Dr. Benjamin Levine had discussed with me when I interviewed him. I myself now do. I was doing the Norwegian 4x4 by running, but now I've switched over to doing it on the air bike because of you, because you have discussed it when I've interviewed you before, but also you've done some really great Instagram. Just for the listener who does not know what the Norwegian 4x4 is, can you just explain that?
So there, you can do a brief warm-up period for a few minutes, and then you're alternating 4 minutes of high-intensity bout of activity where you're going as hard as you can.
I mean, Dr. Levine, sorry to interrupt, said about 85% of your maximum heart rate.
Yeah, about 85% of your max heart rate. I just like to say as hard as you can for 4 minutes because no one can go at 100. You can't go at your max for 4 minutes, but what you can sustain as hard as you can for 4 minutes, so 85% of your max heart rate. And then you have a 3-minute active recovery where you are continuing to move, but at a rate where your heart rate is coming down and recovering as much as it can in 3 minutes. And then you repeat the cycle 4 times. And it's essentially a form of HIIT training, high intensity interval training, which was the core part of his study. The participants did that once or twice per week. And then on other days, they had a more moderate intensity and even an endurance day. But they're, like we've talked about, most people think of sprinting as being on foot or running. And there are so many people that can't do that because of just various conditions, knee arthritis being a common one, a reason why people often shift away or give up running. Or maybe they've had a surgery they're recovering from or something where they have a transient limitation. And so I love to just tell people there are many ways to do high intensity cardio training. It could be on an air bike, which is a fairly whole body. It could be on a ski erg. It could be on a rowing machine. You could do it swimming. For some people, depending on their cardiovascular fitness, they may be able to really jack their heart rate up with an interval walking program, uphill walking, incline walking, walking wearing a weighted vest. These are all ways where you can increase the intensity of your exercise.
Yeah, I just want to point out one thing that if for those of you who don't know what an air bike is, it is one where your arms are engaged. The handles go like that, back and forth. You did mention the walking, and I just want to also point out I've written about and talked about on this show the Japanese interval walking training method, and that is where it's very similar, where you slow walk for 3 minutes. You do this 5 times. It's about half an hour, 40 minutes, and you get that heart rate up, lower heart rate up. It's very effective, again, for those who have some joint or knee issues, and good science.
Using an incline on a treadmill can be a great option for people just because it takes incline walking uphill is really a lot less stress on the patellofemoral joint, on the kneecap for people who have arthritis there. And if you do this on a treadmill, you can get the uphill without having to do the downhill. And that's one of the issues with hilly workouts for people who have arthritis, especially behind the kneecap, is the going uphill part is fine, but the going downhill. And if you do this outside, if you go up, if you want to get back to where you started, you have to go down. So the treadmill with an incline can be a good option too.
Yeah, I mean, I do have arthritis in my knees. I am training for the New York City Marathon right now. And of course, it's a very hilly course. And so I am doing hill repeats. I have to train for them and I will run up the hill, but I find I have to walk down the hill.
Yeah,
for sure. Dr. Wittstein, okay, so bottom line it for us, please. Complete this sentence. 4 minutes a day works, but
not if you are an average or above average person in terms of physical activity level.
Exactly. So really, everyone, I think the message is something is better than nothing. You'll agree with that, Dr. Wittstein, I'm sure.
Yes,
something is better than nothing.
My mantra on a busy day. Something is better than nothing, yeah.
Exactly. And you are very busy, as we know. But something is better than nothing. But you can also take this concept and do it as an exercise snack or on those days when life is just kind of taking over your day and you just really can't.
Or utilize the concept that at higher intensity, even 5 1-minute bouts of intense activity is definitely better than nothing. And that short amount of time is going to be more meaningful to someone than this very low intensity 4-minute program that is, for some people, going to be high intensity, right? That's all relative.
So everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Dr. Wittstein, this was really fun. And I'm going to be doing more of these when I find that a medical study kind of hits the general media and people are really looking at it, but then might take it as an excuse to I only have to do 4 minutes. So I kind of want to bring those to everyone's attention with an expert like yourself, Dr. Wittstein. So I'm looking forward to doing more of these episodes. And of course, everyone, in the show notes, we will have links to that original study so you can check it out for yourself, and also a link to more about Dr. Wittstein and her wonderful book, The Complete Bone and Joint Health Plan. And of course, follow her on Instagram. There will be a link to do that as well in the show notes. Okay, Dr. Wittstein, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks. I hope this is helpful.
Absolutely. Okay, everyone, see you next week. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode of Age Better Podcast, please do a few things. First, share it with all your friends and family. Then, subscribe to Age Better wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, so you never miss a single episode. Finally, if you have ideas for topics you want me to cover in a future episode of Age Better, send an email to agebetterpodcast@gmail.com or reach out to me on social media. Until next time, remember this. We can't control getting older, but we can control how we do it. Talk to you soon. Age Better Podcast is a proud member of the Sound Advice Network. Sound Advice, women's voices amplified.